Hello everyone, ready for part 2 of The Duke Picked Up Something in the Forest. Hit that subscribe button and let's get started. Mother asked why the door had taken so long to open. Jezebel apologized. She said she was drinking tea, and her mother reminded her that she shouldn't be so slow. Jezebel remarked that no one knew how she felt. Her mother sat down next to her and said that she understood better than anyone how much she was trying for her, for the sake of her birthday and her imminent debut, so that Jezebel can be the one to shine. To make Jezebel the sole heir of the Creed family, the girl tried to object, but her mother told her to stop acting like a child. Grace announced that the reception dresses had already been delivered and came to call her daughter for a fitting. Elizabeth was hiding, and she was very lucky that Jezebel warned her, otherwise there would have been big problems. Elizabeth always thought that Jezebel lived happily with this family, with or without the mark. But what they saw proved otherwise. It turned out that Jezebel had her own troubles. The day of Jezebel's birthday reception arrived. The ladies remarked that Earl Creed had truly gone to great lengths. There were rumors that Jezebel was the true heir of the Creed family, and that the Count was especially protective of his first daughter. Grace told her daughter that the Count's wife wanted to give her a gift. The woman greeted Jezebel warmly and said the gift was modest but from the heart. The Countess congratulated the girl on her 9th birthday. Mom was unhappy and reminded Jezebel to smile and not walk around with a dull expression. Jezebel thanked the Countess and said she would cherish the gift. The guests were surprised at how she could be so sweet and said that she was just like her mother. Grace was pleased with the reaction, as this was exactly the attitude she had expected towards her daughter. But this was still not enough. And then Elizabeth finally appeared. Elizabeth Creed's entrance was announced. The guests couldn't understand how she'd even dared to come. It was a good thing she was alone. If Larry or Cecile saw this, they would definitely be upset. Here, however, things were tolerable. The ladies whispered that Elizabeth had put her own mother into eternal sleep and were amazed at her insensitivity. They couldn't understand how she dared to keep her head up. Such children were truly frightening, especially since rumors were circulating that she was secretly leaving the estate. And Funt, terrible. There's probably a reason she's not named the Creed heir. And today, everyone will see confirmation of this, because this is the first event after the Count became the head of the family, and its star was Jezebel. Now it became clear to everyone who the Count was truly favorably disposed towards. Even Jezebel felt that her mother's hatred for Elizabeth had gone too far. The celebration promised to be not only luxurious, but also unusual, since it was unclear until the end who exactly organized it. One of the women remarked that she had not seen Grace for a long time and was glad to finally meet. Archduke Herdane arrived with his wife Diana and son Sarent, as well as his daughter Charlene. Hearing this, Grace immediately grabbed her daughter and headed towards them. Grace said she didn't know about such guests. This was a real stroke of luck, because by establishing a relationship with their family, one could easily get into the center of high society. There was no need to talk about the Archduchess herself, but her daughter was educated and knew her worth. And Sarent, one of the most elite students at the Royal Academy. All of them could have become the perfect decoration, highlighting the beauty of Grace and Jezebel. Grace noted that they seemed unaware of the dress code, as parents and children were expected to wear matching outfits. The Archduchess said she knew but couldn't pay attention to it. Grace replied that it wasn't a problem. The Archduchess warmly congratulated Jezebel on her birthday and sincerely wished her happiness and prosperity. She added that the girl looks even cuter because of the harmony of her outfits with her mother. The daughter called her mother, and they told Grace that they were busy for now. Grace assumed they were looking for someone, and the Archduchess admitted that they wanted to see Elizabeth Creed. Charlene was very eager to meet Elizabeth, and Grace was furious when she realized who they had come for. Elizabeth didn't understand at all why this girl was so happy to meet her. Mother noticed that Charlene was embarrassing Elizabeth, and the Archduchess introduced herself. She said that Elizabeth was much more beautiful than she imagined. Elizabeth asked to let go of her hand so that she could introduce herself according to all the rules of etiquette. The Archduchess replied that formalities could be dispensed with, since her daughter also wanted to say hello. Diana mentioned that she had heard how, thanks to Elizabeth, the land had become fertile again after the drought, and thanked her. Elizabeth said she hadn't really done anything special, but she was still grateful. Diana introduced her son, Sarent, who was pleased to meet them and hoped to get along, but Charlene interrupted him, saying that she was also glad and wanted to be friends. Elizabeth responded with mutual joy and said that she was honored to be friends with such a lady. The Archduchess suggested that they have some fun while she talked to the adults. Jezebel felt like they were in a completely different world, cut off from reality and time. Grace was seething with rage and didn't understand why things weren't going according to her plan. She specifically insisted that the children's and parents' outfits match. All this is done to emphasize that Elizabeth is here alone and has no mother to take care of her. Sarah said that since they were friends, they could switch to informal terms. Elizabeth agreed, and Charlene added that she must come to them for tea next time. Grace didn't understand why it wasn't her own daughter in Elizabeth's place now. Charlene asked point blank if it was true that Elizabeth didn't have a mark, and Sorrent immediately pulled his sister up short. Elizabeth said that everything was fine, and that it was most likely true. Sorrent tried to apologize, but Charlene noted that without the mark, it didn't matter, because the Count still loved Elizabeth very much. The Countess came up to them and said that Lady Harden was greatly mistaken. The lady didn't immediately understand what was being said. The Countess suggested they simply look around, as these were the first receptions since the Count became head of the family, and they were being held in honor of Lady Jezebel's birthday. Charlene was surprised and asked why the Earl himself wasn't there then, if he cherished his daughter so much. The Countess tried to answer, but Grace immediately intervened and stated that he had urgent business. She said he was very upset about not being able to attend. After all, he had personally organized the reception for his beloved daughter, but he had been summoned to the palace. Besides, Creed never liked appearing in public. Now it was Elizabeth who became the object of hatred, so the reception in honor of her sister was held first. Grace added that she hopes that one day Elizabeth will receive enough love too. Suddenly, Dick's voice came from behind, asking who exactly had just become the object of hatred, because he hadn't heard. The Count asked his wife to repeat what she had just said. Grace immediately approached him, but the Count stopped her and said that there was no need to explain anything. Later, she will have to answer for everything that happened today. The Count was shocked by what his wife had done in his absence. Dick told Elizabeth that he was a little late, but the girl was not at all offended. He apologized for making his daughter feel lonely. Elizabeth assured her father that she was fine and that she had made good friends. The Count realized that these were the Archduke's children and realized that his wife had lied. It was now obvious that the Earl's favorite daughter was not Jezebel at all, but Lady Elizabeth, despite the absence of the mark. Dick decided that Elizabeth was tired after the day and suggested that they go out. Alice reminded them that this was a reception in honor of Jezebel's birthday. Elizabeth decided that she would definitely meet her sister later and try to console her. Dick said that Grace was the one who caused this whole mess and that she would have to sort it out. Charlene noticed that the atmosphere had become strange, but her mother immediately told her not to express herself like that. Of course, I felt sorry for the girl, but for a woman who couldn't intimidate one child, this wasn't even a punishment. Charlene asked her mother what impression Elizabeth made on her because she turned out to be more beautiful than they said, and she acted just like an adult. Mom noticed that her children seemed completely enchanted by Elizabeth. The Archduchess suggested inviting Elizabeth to tea with them. Elizabeth received the invitation and was absolutely delighted, looking forward to warm communication and pleasant company. Charlene said that she definitely wanted to play with her, so Elizabeth should come over for tea tomorrow. Sarah asked if Elizabeth would like to ride in the Archduke's carriage and promised to ask her father to send her. Elizabeth replied that it was unnecessary, as she could get there herself. The Archduchess told the Count that the children had quickly found common ground. Diana's daughter was delighted to meet Elizabeth. The Count stepped aside. He approached his daughter and asked if she had decided to go to tea tomorrow, and the little girl confidently confirmed this. Elizabeth already thought that he would be against it, but the Count only added that he would come for her himself. Elizabeth was thrilled that her father would actually come and pick her up in person. The fall of the princess, once considered a future priestess, became a symbol of the collapse of old hopes and the loss of power. The reception had to be hastily concluded, since the Count's permission was never received. In fact, this became an expulsion from high society, and these were the headlines that filled the local newspapers. Grace sent them the highest quality tea leaves, hoping to silence them, but it seems that this was not enough. She blamed Elizabeth for everything, believing that neither mother nor daughter would be able to reach her anymore. The woman decided that she would never forgive and crush Elizabeth Creed, just like her mother, and blind hatred boiled inside her. Past memories floated through her mind, while Elizabeth saw the Archduke's estate for the first time and was genuinely happy. The Archduchess met her and, after greeting her, reminded her again that formalities were not necessary here. She said that Charlene and Sorrent were already waiting in the dining room, and Elizabeth needed to go there. Archduke James Hardane, Diana's husband, stood before her. Elizabeth introduced herself and was pleased to make his acquaintance. He warmly expressed his pleasure at her visit, and Elizabeth thanked him for the invitation. The couple decided to take a walk, and the butler escorted Elizabeth to the palace. James noticed that she was exactly as his wife had described and called her amazing. Now it became clear to them why Elizabeth was so loved, even without the mark. It turns out the rumors about Dick being especially protective of her were true, and Diana confirmed it. Even Count Dick's usually cold face showed a warm tenderness when he looked at her. Charlene suggested starting the tea ceremony, since everyone had already eaten. Elizabeth said that everything looked incredibly delicious, especially the cake from their chef. Actually, Charlene wanted to play in her room, and her brother wanted to join in too. Elizabeth replied that it was not a problem at all because it was always more fun together. Sarant admitted that he had a reason to talk over tea. He asked if it was true that Elizabeth was learning swordsmanship, and he asked if she would be against training with them. Charlene asked if Elizabeth was okay, noting that such things were immediately obvious to those who trained themselves. Elizabeth decided to find out why Sarant had suggested this. He explained that in her county, they didn't teach swordsmanship, but they had excellent instructors. Charlene said that the point was also that they would be able to see each other every day, for which Sarant immediately reprimanded her. She asked if she was right, but he replied that the reason was completely different. Elizabeth thanked him for the offer, but admitted that due to certain circumstances, her current place of study was more suitable for her. Charlene felt sorry for her, as she would have been happy to see Elizabeth more often, using training as an excuse to meet. Sarant wanted to ask her about these circumstances, but decided that she would tell him herself when she was ready. Elizabeth promised this, and Charlene noticed that her brother blushed. Sarant said that she just imagined it, but her sister still tried to make out his face. Training here would have been a good idea, but Elizabeth enjoyed the opportunity to see the Duke of Baln, whom she missed greatly. Charlene asked what she was thinking about, and Elizabeth replied that she was thinking about nothing. Charlene suggested they talk about something interesting, but a maid entered the room and apologized for the intrusion. She reported that Earl Creed had arrived and said that he had come to take Lady Elizabeth. Elizabeth was surprised because he arrived so early, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she had to quickly get herself ready. The Count expected to return immediately after dinner, and the brother and sister were quietly talking among themselves. Elizabeth told her father that next time they should arrange a time in advance. She apologized and promised to come again soon. The Count suggested stopping by a bookstore since they were leaving so early. Charlene remarked that Mom and Dad would be very surprised, but Sarant could not have imagined that the Count would come in person. Sarant consoled his sister, saying that Elizabeth would come again soon, and they would simply send another invitation. A few days later, on the border with Jethrin, Duke Balne awoke in horror from a familiar dream. He asked her what she was doing again, and the girl replied that, as always, she was planting plants. The man said that she was wasting her time on something useless again. He asked her if she felt sorry for the seed she had worked so hard to obtain, but the girl thought otherwise. He reminded them that last time, nothing worked out, and that the earth rejected them. She must understand this, seeing how people die of hunger and fall into eternal sleep. But nothing will change if you just give up. Even if the results are not visible now, she feels that everything is changing, little by little. The land and people are changing, and he sees it too. He saw again the eyes of those who had not given up, and he did not understand why this dream was returning. Suddenly, a servant ran in and reported the attack, and Balne ordered everyone to take up swords. Soon everything calmed down a little, and the knight thought so too. Balne noted that attacks had become more frequent, although losses had so far been minor. Even minor damage could not be ignored, and he ordered that everything be put in order and that the wounded be helped. Balne thought that Elizabeth did this in the hope that he would return safe and sound. He didn't feel any magic, but he believed that the amulet was still having an effect. Balne ordered Harke to ensure that the wounded received assistance as quickly as possible. The boy didn't quite understand what exactly his master meant, because they had to return home as early as possible. Harke didn't understand why everything had suddenly changed, and Balne asked if he wanted to go back. But Harke wasn't talking about that, and decided it was better to just do his job faster. The boy became curious about why he was so drawn to home. He decided not to delay and give orders right away. Elizabeth was shocked when her father proposed a lavish party to celebrate her 11th birthday. She told her dad that it would be enough for her to spend the day alone with him, or to invite only her closest friends. Dick admitted that he had been a bad father all this time, and they never celebrated her birthday. That's why he wanted to celebrate it properly, because it would be his first real congratulation. Her father apologized if she found it burdensome. His voice was genuinely regretful. He was afraid of adding unnecessary trouble to her. Elizabeth was grateful for his wish, but the situation with Jezebel had happened only recently. Because of this, she will be looked at askance, so it is better to arrange a joint reception later. The Count smiled and wondered who she took after and agreed to do as she said. Grace was praying at the temple, and when Kihar arrived, she immediately said that he was late. Priest Kihar reminded her that he was a busy man, and Grace knew it very well. He asked why she insisted on meeting in person. Grace told him not to pretend he didn't understand why. The woman screamed at him, asking how much longer she would have to wait. Now all attention was focused on Elizabeth. The love and care that her daughter should have received was given entirely to Elizabeth. This girl has already taken Jess's rightful place, so she needs to be put into eternal sleep before it's too late. The priest understood her anxiety, but asked her to pull herself together. He reminded her that he had already told her about the need to wait for the right moment. Grace did not understand when it would come, believing that it should happen after Elizabeth had won all the love of society. The priest insisted that this was how things were supposed to go, but Grace thought it was complete nonsense. Kihar assured her that it was best to trust his leadership and not act on her own. You need to wait for the moment when she will be bathing in love and not suspecting anything, when her happiness will reach its peak. This is exactly what they will be waiting for, and Grace must understand and obey him. Larry asked Elizabeth to come to her. When she did, she was shocked. In front of her was a multitude of outfits sent by Count Dick. Elizabeth didn't even immediately understand why her dad did it. Larry explained that her first birthday party was coming up soon. The maid asked if she had forgotten about it, and Elizabeth replied that she had been very busy lately. Besides, she had never celebrated a birthday before, so it all seemed new and special to her. Larry reassured her, saying that now they could celebrate in style, and they enthusiastically began choosing a dress. On the day of the party, Elizabeth approached her father and asked what he was doing. The Count was surprised. Ellie said the maid had advised him to wear something festive and special, but Elizabeth felt that this was not at all suitable for her, and asked her father if he agreed with her. Dick objected, saying that she was very beautiful, like an angel descended from heaven. He remarked that since she was so beautiful today, they could still arrange a lavish reception. Elizabeth reminded that guests would be arriving soon, including the heirs of the Archduke of Hardane. Dick decided it would be better to meet them a little later. What a relief that his father always acted quickly. He invited Ellie to his place, believing that the guests wanted to see her, not him. Who would have thought that the day would come when Elizabeth would hold her father's hand, and to meet friends who came, especially to congratulate her on her birthday, rejoicing that they all gathered together. Elizabeth wanted to continue to be as happy as she was with these people, and at least this time, fully enjoy your last life. Time flew by, and Elizabeth met her 13th spring. Now she could easily run 30 laps around the sports ground. Although it wasn't easy, she could already make 100 swings with the sword. Her father remembered how thin she had been just 2 years ago, and couldn't help but admire how much she had grown up. Over time, she gained a little weight and began to look especially cute. Elizabeth asked her father why he was smiling like that. Dick replied that everything was fine. He just wanted to make his daughter even happier, so that her smile would shine brighter than everyone else. Dick said he wanted to discuss her 13th birthday and throw a lavish reception this time. He asked permission, reminding her that he had promised to make up for all the missed childhood holidays. This time he would definitely carry out his plan, he was sure of it. Elizabeth noticed that her father was too serious to talk about a children's party. Dick said it was very important to him, and Elizabeth agreed to celebrate his birthday the way he wanted. She hoped that all the guests would be able to truly enjoy the day. Father promised and immediately said that it was time to start preparing. Elizabeth was surprised, but her father pointed out that there was only a month left, and she decided that was enough. The Count decided to invite the most famous chef of the empire and order a 10-tiered cake. Elizabeth realized that this truly worried him. Dick added that there was news: the Duke of Balne was returning. Perhaps he had already arrived, and Dick had asked her to say hello to him if she met him at the estate. A week later, the Emperor came to the Duke and asked with a smile how long he had been waiting for him. No matter how much of a monster he was, the Emperor still treasured Balne and wanted to embrace him. Balne invited him to sit down, and the Emperor remarked that he was still as prickly as ever, having refused the festival in honor of his return. In any case, Dale was glad to be back safe and sound. Balne dismissed the matter, saying he healed quickly. Since the Duke was fine, the Emperor suggested spending the night drinking. Balne said that he was leaving, but the Emperor asked him to stop. because he had good news. There would be a reception at Count Creed's estate this month, and the Emperor hoped Balne would attend. The Duke didn't understand why this was considered good news, since he was clearly not a fan of receptions. He has been away from Separan for a long time and is unaware that this is a celebration in honor of Elizabeth's birthday. The very same girl whom the Count loves so much, even despite the absence of the mark. Balne did not understand why the Count had changed so much, but the Emperor did not know the details either. Balne believed that she should have changed, because when they first met, she had difficulty even standing. The Emperor added that the reception would still be magnificent, but the Duke left without listening to the end. The Emperor shouted after him that if he changed his mind, he could come in the evening. Balne asked what they meant. The Emperor replied that he would be there with Cain. Balne suspected that the Emperor was up to something, but he insisted that he had simply decided to introduce his peers. Balne didn't really believe it, and the Emperor didn't understand why he was looking at him like that. In the end, the Duke did not listen any further and resolutely left. Balne was a mysterious figure, incomprehensible even to the Emperor, despite years of acquaintance. As close as they were, Dale couldn't understand how Balne could slam the door like that. He decided not to ruin a good day with heavy thoughts and discuss the gift with Cain. Balne considered the reception in honor of Lady Elizabeth's birthday a matter that did not concern him, although he himself did not know what to do with the gift he had already bought. The lady not only became more resilient, but also improved her swordsmanship, so the butler intensified her training. Balne asked Rand if it was so important that he should report it to him in the bedroom. Rand thought the gentleman was worried, since he ordered to report as soon as possible. He heard from Harky that the gentleman had treated the gift for Lady Elizabeth with great care and still wore it. She will arrive in the evening, so it would be better if he watched her training himself. Balne asked whether the Emperor was offering him the opportunity to see this personally. Even the Duke himself found it hard to believe that he was so worried about Lady Elizabeth. He decided that this wouldn't do and wanted to simply send Rand to deliver the gift. At that moment, Lady Elizabeth knocked on the door and asked if she could come in. Balne gave her permission. The girl thanked him. He asked if training was over, and she replied that it had just ended. She was going to go home straight away, but she didn't want to miss the chance to see that he was really back. Elizabeth was worried that he was injured and asked if he knew when he would be going back to the battlefield. Balne replied that he was not wounded and would rest for a while in Separan. This was a great relief for Elizabeth, who had been very worried about him. Balne remarked that it was thanks to her. Elizabeth asked about the Calburn Forest, and he confirmed it. But he also talked about a talisman. Perhaps it was just a fantasy, but this time luck was on his side. Elizabeth was surprised, and the Duke asked what had happened. She was simply glad he had kept the talisman. Balne said he had something for her, and he was just about to deliver it through Rand. It was her birthday present, and Elizabeth was immensely grateful. She was surprised that he was presenting her with a gift right then and there. Balne explained that he would not be attending the reception. He asked not to worry about this because he simply doesn't like such events. Elizabeth said that she understood everything, and besides, she could always see him here. Balne replied that he thought Elizabeth should not come to this house anymore. The girl asked if she had done anything wrong, but that wasn't the point. He brought it up for her sake. A young girl who frequently visits a man's house may be misunderstood by those around her. Elizabeth thought that the reason was different, because almost no one knew about her visits to the Duke. The conversation ended abruptly when Larry entered the room and asked when the lady had returned. Elizabeth replied that she had just arrived. Larry was very worried because she was late. Elizabeth apologized and said that she had taken a long time to pack her things because the Duke was a busy man and she should not disturb him. From that moment on, Elizabeth decided to train on her own. Larry said it was a smart decision and added that the Count could help so they could study together. Elizabeth couldn't believe at dinner that the maid would actually train with her, but Larry agreed. First, they had to unpack or take a bath, and Elizabeth chose the bath. Her tracksuit was very worn out, so it was time to buy a new one. Suddenly, Larry noticed something outside the window and was horrified. People were running around and shouting about a fire in the greenhouse. The greenhouse was engulfed in flames, and Elizabeth couldn't believe it. The flames lit up the night sky, and her heart sank with pain and fear. Only there could she smell her mother and feel her presence. Elizabeth didn't know what to do and asked Larry what would happen if the greenhouse burned down completely. She was worried about the people, but the maid assured her that everything would be fine. Larry said she would go help, but the lady needed to stay here for now. Elizabeth didn't see the point of training if she couldn't do anything at the crucial moment. She felt pathetic, but decided to pull herself together. She couldn't just sit there, since the fire was probably already being put out, but she wanted to know how serious it was. Elizabeth decided to go out and help, but she ran into Grace at the door. Grace asked if she was looking for her maid, adding that she wouldn't be back soon. She said that she already knew about the fire, and all the servants went to the greenhouse. Elizabeth couldn't prove that Grace did it, but she confessed. She couldn't bear to watch him spend time there, and Elizabeth drag him there. Elizabeth didn't understand what Grace wanted, but she said that it was late now, and it would be better to come tomorrow. Grace replied that Elizabeth was just pretending to be stupid, although in reality she was not, but she didn't care, because all she was required to do was stand still. Elizabeth decided not to lose heart, because now she was not as helpless as in past lives. She told the Countess that if she did not leave immediately, she would tell her father everything. Grace chuckled, saying that in that way, Elizabeth was very much like her mother. The same appearance and the same character that doesn't know what it means to give up. And this noble look, even though they have nothing, which means the end may be the same. Elizabeth pushed Grace's hand away and asked her not to talk about her mother like that. Grace said she was being cheeky, even while shaking with fear. She added that she could also talk about her and her mother's talent for charming people. Elizabeth knew she shouldn't give in, but she couldn't stand it any longer. She knew Grace was her mother's best friend. That's probably why she immediately appeared here after learning about her plunge into eternal sleep, to take the place that her friend had vacated, and Grace asked her again in horror. But even having taken this place, she was still unable to win the Count's love. Elizabeth said that she would tell her the secret because Grace's behavior and appearance were far from her father's tastes. Grace said that she knew nothing and only spared her as a child, and yet she dared to be insolent towards her. Elizabeth replied that she was not spared out of pity. Grace was simply afraid of losing her father's attention. In the end, that's exactly what happened, and Grace couldn't believe it. At first, she started laughing hysterically, hoping that it would make it easier. But relief would only come when Elizabeth was plunged into eternal sleep. The girl couldn't believe the power this woman possessed. Elizabeth tried to escape through the window, but Grace immediately grabbed her. She asked if she was going to jump and suggested she try again. Or you can start begging for mercy, because all this anger was caused by Elizabeth herself. Elizabeth didn't want this to end, and at that moment there was a knock on the door, after which Grace let her go. Grace asked what had happened. The servant informed her that Abbot Kihar had arrived and was looking for her, and that the maids were already returning. He added that it was time for the lady to go, and Grace said that Elizabeth was lucky this time. She warned that the next time no one would come into this room. When Elizabeth was put into eternal sleep, Elizabeth decided that she would not leave it like that, and would definitely tell about Grace's strength. The maids ran into the room, asking in horror what had happened, and Cecile ordered that a doctor be called immediately. Elizabeth knew she had to tell her how dangerous Grace was, so she wouldn't hurt her people anymore. Grace asked the priest what prophecy he was talking about. He spoke of the prophecy in the temple without a master, and Grace doubted he knew what he was saying. She considered it a deception, as before, but Kihar knew how to distinguish truth from fiction. The prophecy never appeared in the temple without a master, and Kihar agreed with her. But this time, the emperor himself saw him, and Grace knew she would have to check. She asked what the emperor had said, and Kihar whispered the answer to her. He added that even if this is true, their plan will not change. The mark would appear on her daughter, and Grace had difficulty comprehending it, feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety. Kihar said that the last nun with the mark was born over 400 years ago. There are no records of the mark's appearance, and those who knew about it are long gone. There is a place he can't find, but the plan can still continue. Kihar heard that the first daughter had lost consciousness, and Grace admitted that she had been overcome with rage. The priest reminded that even if Jezebel gets a mark, Grace must understand that prison will put an end to the whole plan. She replied that as the emperor's daughter, she would not be accused without evidence. Kihar agreed, but said to leave Elizabeth alone until the time when she could be put into eternal sleep. Elizabeth was their scapegoat, and Kihar promised to contact her later. Grace decided to wait, because when Jezebel got the mark, the love would belong to them. A week later, Dick thought about how he should have protected his daughter. Whatever the prophecy says, until the time comes, Elizabeth must forgive her father. He failed in his task, and the consequences were too severe. A month later, Kihar asked if the Count's first daughter had woken up. It was said that the Countess had been sent to the Leitern estate in the south, and this gave rise to many rumors. Her self-confidence led to her being effectively exiled from the palace. Kihar sent the servant away, believing that it would not change anything, since for him they were just expendable material. The servant was wondering whether he should report that Duke Baln often visited Count Creed's estate. He remembered those precious moments, and didn't know if she would remember him when it all started. The great god spoke to Separan, speaking of a blue flower that would put an end to chaos. They are obliged to protect the flower, because when it blooms, all enemies will be brought to justice. The blue flower must be protected at all costs. The god has not abandoned Separan. It was a true prophecy, and the story became more and more intense. The emperor noticed that the night was especially dark today, as it had been after the events of 7 years ago. He asked Dick if he knew why he had been called, understanding his concern for Elizabeth. 7 years have passed since the prophecy, but the mark never appeared in Separan. The alarm grew, and the attacks did not stop. They needed Dick's help more than ever, as 7 years had passed since Elizabeth had fallen asleep. He got rid of the threats too late, and now could only beg the sleeping child to open his eyes. The Count was unable to protect even one child, and did not understand what else he was capable of doing. The Emperor shared his pain, but did not consider it his fault, although Dick thought only of Elizabeth. The Count wanted to leave, but Dale tried to stop him, but Dick said that if necessary, he could simply give the order. It was the first time Dale had seen the Earl so broken since Lady Miel had fallen into eternal sleep. Rand told the master that perhaps it was time to stop, since 7 years had passed since that day. Balnay asked if he really wanted to leave her to die. The butler denied it and quietly apologized. The master understood why Rand was so worried. In his hands was the Kendra Cup, a divine artifact capable of creating potions that sustained life. However, in exchange for this, she demanded a colossal amount of magical energy. Perhaps this is why even the lives of people completely deprived of their power couldn't fill the artifact even halfway. It was called the Cup of Eternal Sleep. And Balnay's useless body, for which he blamed himself, could prove useful in at least this way. Then he would have hated himself even more. For him, time stood still the year he turned 20. It was so long ago that his memories were already fading. Balnay found himself trapped in time, not even knowing the reason for his imprisonment. He had to watch everything disappear. Day after day, spent in frozen time. Empty days when Balnay ran away to war, trying to fill the growing emptiness inside. If this meaningless life is to have any meaning at all, Rand must send a letter to the duchy. The butler asked what exactly he should write. The gentleman ordered that he indicate that he was sending the potion in honor of his 21st birthday. Grace inquired about what was happening in Separan's high society these days. The girl noticed that her mother always asks this question when she visits there. Fashion had changed again, and she was ashamed to appear there in such a rustic outfit. His mother didn't think he'd help her with that, but Jezebel had read that he certainly would. His help usually amounted to a couple of tasteless dresses, which she was obliged to wear to all events. It would have been easier to put her into an eternal sleep. Jezebel asked her mother if she realized how pathetic she looked. At the same time, the mother knew nothing and could not even get out of there. Jezebel had to endure all this humiliation because of her mother. Grace said she was truly sorry. She didn't want to believe that her daughter wouldn't even give her a chance to apologize. Jezebel replied that she wouldn't. After that, her mother hugged her, and Jezebel thought about what she had just said. The girl immediately began apologizing. Grace asked her to speak more quietly, as it seemed she had had a bad dream. But her mother will definitely give her back everything that Jezebel truly deserves. Therefore, she must trust only her and continue to do what she is ordered to do. All they have to do is follow the plan. They haven't even started yet. Balnay apologized for the early and sudden visit. The Count asked him not to speak like that. After all, if it weren't for the potion he provides them with, Dick wouldn't be able to keep Elizabeth alive. Balnay handed over the gift. Dick didn't immediately realize what it was. The Duke was away on Elizabeth's birthday, traveling to the front. Dick was very pleased because Baln always thought of gifts for her, but it was Dick who had to thank him. Balnay replied that it didn't matter because he wasn't doing it for gratitude. The Count then offered to deliver the gift in person. Balnay was grateful but declined. He was about to leave when the Emperor's order came to appear at the palace, and Balnay had to leave the estate. Then the Count realized that it was Balnay who was handling the affairs of the imperial family instead of him. Dick didn't know if he'd ever be able to repay him. Balnay pointed out that there was no need to mention it every time, since he was helping of his own free will. He added that it was time for him to go, and there was no need to see him out. A little more, and he would have agreed to deliver the gift in person. After all, she was already 20. The butler served the gentleman morelina leaf tea with cookies. This tea helps with insomnia and clears the mind. Dick thanked him, but said he didn't want to right now. The butler reminded him that the leaves had a powerful healing effect. Morelina trees are easily killed by even a light frost or a small rainstorm. If the leaves are harvested, they must be dried under strict conditions. This is a very delicate tea plant. However, there was plenty of stock in the warehouse. Miss Larry said that after 7 years of aging, they were almost like medicine. Therefore, the butler considered it his duty to serve them to his master. After all, these leaves were grown by Lady Elizabeth herself. The gentleman often skipped meals, and Elizabeth decided that he should at least drink good tea, so she raised him herself. Dick noticed the pleasant aroma. This little child had done all this for him. Burns wanted to discuss something with the gentleman. Dick himself understood that he had come for more than just tea. The lady announced that she would be arriving in the capital in connection with the upcoming event for debutantes and asked what the orders would be. It pained Dick to realize that his daughter Grace's debut would take place earlier than Elizabeth's. Perhaps out of guilt for ignoring Ellie as a child, he no longer wanted to shift responsibility for adults' mistakes onto the child. The Count ordered that they be provided with everything they needed because they were longing for luxury. If we accommodate them now, they'll behave more restrainedly. The butler understood and took his leave. Today the Count especially missed his daughter. It was unbearably hard for him to be without her. Suddenly Elizabeth woke up. She didn't understand why she was crying or why her body felt so grown up. Her whole body ached, but she couldn't understand why. All she could remember was that Grace had attacked her. Lake came to see her because she had finally woken up. He noticed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He said that it was difficult for her to move now, and after his magic it would become easier, and talking would not be so painful. Elizabeth was amazed. Everything had hurt just a minute ago, and now it felt better. She was sincerely grateful. She remembered what had happened and asked what had happened to the greenhouse, whether anyone had been hurt, and why she felt so bad. Lake asked if she really didn't remember anything. Elizabeth only remembered Grace's attack. The rest didn't add up, only the feeling that she was having a very sad dream. It was entirely possible. During such a long sleep, she was bound to have had at least one nightmare. Elizabeth was shocked and did not want to believe that this time she had not slept for 3 days. Lake said she'd been asleep for 7 years. The girl couldn't accept the truth. She approached the mirror and couldn't understand how this was possible. Elizabeth didn't recognize herself. Lake understood her reaction because she was seeing herself for the first time in 7 years. Besides, she couldn't have imagined herself at that age before. It felt like it wasn't her. But the problem was deeper. This was her last chance, and she'd wasted 7 whole years of sleep. Elizabeth didn't know what to do now. Lake suggested looking at the positive side of the situation. She was almost falling into eternal sleep, but it didn't happen. Elizabeth began to cry, realizing that anger and sadness would not bring back the lost years. Lake was afraid that her long sleep would make her look like an adult but think like a child. It seemed he was wrong. Elizabeth knew he couldn't help her, but she wanted to know what had happened during those 7 years. Lake said he would tell her everything very briefly so that she could draw her own conclusions. And although nothing outstanding happened in the empire itself, there were indeed many events. Elizabeth realized how much her father cared about her. If he had serious problems, he wouldn't have had time for her. There were only 2 years of the future she remembered ahead, and the most important thing in it was the harsh winter with Zerper's disease. In a past life, a huge number of people fell into eternal sleep due to the lack of a cure for this disease. But this time, Elizabeth had prepared a sufficient amount of funds in advance. Now the main problem is the approaching winter, a terrible plague, and bitter frosts. The aristocrats survived, finding medicine at any cost, or finding wizards. Ordinary people fell into eternal sleep, either because of illness or because of hunger. Creed-Yon Jamin was no exception. She had to be cremated due to a lack of cemetery space. Elizabeth needs to retrieve the magical stone before winter sets in. It plays a key role in her plan, and time is running out. A real winter will also come with the fast. These stones are incredibly expensive, and only aristocrats can afford them. But Elizabeth knows a way to get them in large quantities, although no one can guarantee success. While Elizabeth slept, Kihara became the High Priestess. Before losing consciousness, Elizabeth heard that Grace had met with her. Besides, Grace is now the priestess's viceroy. The two were definitely connected. Now that Kihar has gained control of the temple, Grace will definitely not be left out. Elizabeth was extremely curious about this power she was using. She had never seen anything like it in her past life. Suddenly, Elizabeth felt a stabbing pain. An itching sensation appeared on her wrist, and the mark began to appear. At first, the mark looked like a blue gemstone, but later its color could change. Elizabeth couldn't believe she had acquired a sacred mark. It was something she couldn't show anyone. She had read for sure that by the age of 20, the mark became the size of a thumbnail. But hers was very tiny. She had no idea when exactly it had appeared. If the mark had appeared while she was sleeping, her father and Larry, who had cared for her for all 7 years, could not have failed to notice it. The priestess, considered almost a god by the people of the empire, is immediately sent to the temple after the mark is discovered, where she lives for the rest of her life for the good of the empire. Elizabeth assumed she hadn't been sent to the temple, even if the mark had been noticed. Hearing familiar voices behind the door, she realized that the mark needed to be hidden urgently. She found the bracelet and realized it could hide her for a while. Larry and the Count entered and were shocked. Dick immediately rushed to hug her. He missed her so much. Elizabeth asked him to let her go because she was having trouble breathing. He apologized for making her feel alone and for failing to protect her. Dick wanted so badly to apologize. He was grateful that she was alive, that she had opened her eyes and called him father again. Elizabeth said she was fine, but her father didn't want her to overexert herself after 7 years of sleep. The girl couldn't tell him the incredible story about how, thanks to Lake, she felt great. The Count was so worried about her, and Elizabeth briefly considered telling him about the mark, but immediately abandoned the idea. If anyone outside the family found out about this, especially Grace, she would not be able to protect herself or her people. The first thing she must do is learn to use the power of the mark. Until then, everything must be kept a closely guarded secret. Her father asked if she could tell him about what happened 7 years ago. But if it's hard for her to talk about it now, he's ready to wait until she feels better. Elizabeth asked her father to promise that if she told him everything, he would not put anyone into eternal sleep. The Count said there was a price to pay for actions. Elizabeth noted that 7 years had passed, and it was unlikely there would be any evidence. Besides, she doesn't believe her stepmother did it without reason. She clearly had her own motive. Elizabeth wants to know why everything happened, and if she decides to figure it out, it's best to return to her normal life as if nothing happened. After all, she'll probably try to get close to her again, and even Alice's awakening will already bring her enough pain. Elizabeth is afraid that her father might harm someone because of her, and wants to avoid this at all costs. The Count understood her and admitted he had acted on emotion. He promised that no one would be plunged into eternal sleep, so she can tell everything about her first meeting with the Duke of Balne and how Grace abandoned her in the forest. Elizabeth reminded her father of his promise. If this continued, he would definitely relapse. That's why she said that she's okay now, and it's because her father protected her. Elizabeth hasn't even lost weight, despite being bedridden for 7 years. It's amazing how well she feels. Her father explained that it was all thanks to Kendron's potion. Elizabeth had long been curious about this remedy. She wanted to know what medicinal herbs it was brewed from. It turned out the Duke Balne had recently brought it as a gift. She couldn't have imagined that this was what saved her life. It wasn't just any medicine, but a special potion created with the help of a sacred relic. Conventional remedies were ineffective, and Elizabeth was slowly fading away. So Duke Balne used a relic that was not supposed to be known to the public. The bracelet turned out to be his birthday present. His father sensed a strange aura about it and asked to see it. Elizabeth was shocked that they actually felt something and asked if it was related to the bracelet. She simply decided it was a piece of jewelry for her and put it on. The Count replied that it was rightfully hers, since everything in Creed County was hers. Duke Balne brought the bracelet as a gift, but his father sensed magic in it and wanted to examine it closely. Every year, Balne brought not only Kendron's potion, but also a gift for her birthday. The bracelet combined movement and protection magic. Judging by its power, he'd been working on it for a long time. He seems to have created it out of concern for Elizabeth. It would be nice if she wore it all the time. Elizabeth noticed that Lake never mentioned the Duke of Balne. She wondered what he was doing now. But her father reminded her that it was time to take Kendron's potion. Elizabeth didn't think she still needed to drink it. But her body had gotten used to it, and abruptly stopping was dangerous, the Duke said. After drinking the potion, she suddenly felt ill. A sharp pain appeared at the site of the mark, and she couldn't understand the cause. Father wanted to help, but Elizabeth said it wouldn't last long. And indeed, the pain lasted only a moment. When he removed the bracelet, he saw the mark. Dick noted that the head of the Creed family had special abilities. One of them is the ability to calm by feeling the energy of blessing. As soon as he took her hand, the pain disappeared. The Count quietly said that the mark had appeared after all. She was very small and weak. Apparently, the mark had reacted to the potion's energy and caused rejection. Elizabeth asked if he was sure it was a mark. It was still growing, but he had no doubt. So, according to the rules, she'll have to go to the temple. It's the Creed family's duty, and he can do it right now. But the Count noticed that she was having a hard time and decided that Elizabeth needed to be alone. Dick said that he urgently needed to sort things out, and that she should rest for now. He promised to come in the morning and asked her not to get out of bed and to recover properly. Elizabeth really hoped that nothing bad would happen and fell asleep. The Count asked Kamel how many free holy nights they currently had. The Flower Knights are the Creed family's protectors, tasked with protecting the child with the mark until it is sent to the temple. Kamel replied that there were 5 of them. The Count ordered them all to be assigned to Elizabeth, but Kamel clarified that they were already guarding her. The Count said that this was not enough, and ordered that everyone who would be free in the near future be sent to her. The Lady of the Holy Knights is here now, and their previous tasks are cancelled. Now their goal is not just to guard her until she is sent to the temple. Even after she gets there, they will continue to protect her. The Count asked Miel if he had made the right choice in giving such orders. Duke Baln rode along, pondering a dream. His name was Bardze, and he was the god of abundance. The woman asked if he was really ready to share his divine power, but borrowing a god's power wasn't easy. She said she'd never take it lightly. He didn't want to just share power, he wanted to own it. The woman asked what this proposal meant and what benefit she would receive in exchange for support. Her family will become his messengers and voice on earth from generation to generation. As a family blessed by God, they will gain wealth and glory. It will be a great gift and at the same time a curse that requires sacrifice. So he asked her if she was ready to accept the curse hidden under the blessing. Elizabeth told Mr. Bards that she agreed and accepted his blessing. Balney didn't understand what it was. Rand asked if his master was all right. The Duke replied that all was well and asked how much further it was to the Creed estate. Rand said he could still rest a little. The Duke didn't understand why he didn't remember this. Elizabeth. The girl decided she had to ask him directly. She needed to know what he was thinking. Elizabeth asked if she could come in. Her father granted her permission, and the butler greeted the lady. Burns remarked that seeing her walk around the estate made him realize what it was like to be in 7th heaven. Dick reminded the butler to attend to his assigned duties. Burns said she could be called any time if she needed anything. Elizabeth inquired about what exactly her father had instructed Burns to do. Nothing had changed while she was asleep, but now the time had come for her to move into the main building. It should have been done earlier, and her father had apologized. Elizabeth said she didn't see a problem with it and was even happy about the move. But for some reason, my father was worried that her rooms would be there. After all, she'd have to leave for the temple soon anyway. At that moment, he mentioned the mark. Father thought it was better to hide its existence for now. He didn't want to send her to the temple. A child with a mark becomes the master of the temple, and that's the Creed family's duty. But all 7 years of Elizabeth's sleep became a real nightmare for him. Then he decided that after she woke up, he would always be there to protect his daughter. And he would never leave her alone again. Elizabeth said she didn't want to leave and live in the temple. She didn't want that at all. Her father replied that she had nothing to worry about. He would do everything as she wished. By the way, he asked if she was ready for the guest who would soon arrive. The Duke of Balney is on his way here to meet Elizabeth and will be here in about an hour. Elizabeth was shocked and cried out that she needed to get ready immediately. Her father asked her not to overexert herself. She replied that he had nothing to worry about. Dick merely noted that in his eyes, she was still a child. No matter what happens, he will always be there for Ellie and make her happy. Duke Baln didn't understand why he was so nervous. After all, 7 whole years had passed. I guess it was normal, considering it was the first time they had met in so long. A father without pity. Only now did these memories return to him. Everyone wished the witch eternal sleep. He noted how desperately she had tried to achieve such an end. The woman said that if you look not at the outcome but at her entire journey, then such a plunge into eternal sleep does not seem so scary. The man asked her to let him know if she had any last wishes. He hoped she would ask him to save her, but, as always, everything happened according to her will. The woman said that he had already fulfilled her wish. because she would spend her last moments next to him. It was stupid, but if she had another life, everything might have turned out differently. Elizabeth entered the room and noticed that His Highness was probably already tired of waiting. Balm was shocked. Elizabeth asked if he was feeling well, but he denied it. She noticed that he had lost a lot of weight and almost touched him. Balnay said it was because of a recent business trip. Elizabeth replied that he needed to rest. The Duke remarked that she should worry more about her health than his. Elizabeth was surprisingly active. She said she felt fine and that his medication had really helped. Realizing this, Elizabeth finally bowed and sincerely thanked the Duke for his concern. The Duke became curious as to when she had been addressing him so formally, and he invited the lady to sit down. Elizabeth was still too young then. The Duke remarked that now it sounded as if she were no longer a child. Elizabeth had indeed grown older. She had awakened after 7 years of sleep, and he probably still saw her as a 13-year-old girl. The Duke said it would be better if she started calling him by his old name. Just Mr. Balnay. Elizabeth is sincerely grateful to him. Ideally, she should have come to visit and express her gratitude in person. But in the end, it was he who ended up here. Suddenly, the Duke asked the Countess not to move for a minute. Elizabeth said she didn't understand why he was doing this when he could have just sat down next to her. She assumed he had noticed the mark, but she couldn't figure out how. Elizabeth admitted she was ticklish. He immediately apologized. She thought he hadn't changed much, but he'd become much softer. Balna asked her if she liked the bracelet. Elizabeth sighed, deciding it was all because of him. She really liked the bracelet. Not only was it beautiful, but it felt like it had been made especially for her, and it fit perfectly. The Duke really took a long time choosing this gift, and wanted to see Elizabeth wear it. The girl was grateful for his concern, but he was too close now. Balnay immediately apologized. The feeling was strange. Elizabeth didn't understand why she was so worried. She decided that the reason was that something like this had never happened in her past lives. He didn't even allow her to come to the Creed estate, despite his daughter's debut. Grace threw away the letter and told the maid that she and Jezebel would go to Creed Manor first. The maid asked if the Count had given permission. Grace replied that Jezebel was the Count's true daughter, and that was enough. She told the maid to take good care of her daughter, as she was worried about sending her alone. But Grace herself needed to deal with Kihara's errand. She wanted to show Elizabeth how easily she could be abandoned. 2 days later, Elizabeth was glad that her father had changed and become more caring out of love for her. However, the estate turned out to be so large that she had a hard time getting used to it. The mark grew larger and began to hurt, as if a child were experiencing a growth spurt. She needed to be hidden immediately. At that moment, someone asked her to wait, and Elizabeth looked back. The voice came straight from the mark. Finally, she had someone to talk to. She had been waiting for this for so long, although she herself did not yet understand who it was. Elizabeth assumed that the stranger was the mark itself. The girl confirmed this. This was the first time Elizabeth had heard that the mark had its own essence. The books hadn't mentioned it. The girl noticed that Ani seemed special. She hadn't yet gone to the temple or become a priestess, but she could already hear her. The stranger also didn't understand why she was only partially there, and asked if Elizabeth knew how to use her power. Elizabeth asked what this power was. In any case, she would find out everything when the mark grew larger. The stranger looked as if she had a lot of worries. Now they would always be together. Elizabeth realized that she didn't even know her name and couldn't keep calling her Miss Mark. Her name was Rindale Barknakeben Hartraprel, but that was too long for Elizabeth. She suggested calling her simply Rin. She thought for a moment and happily agreed. Elizabeth couldn't even imagine what abilities the mark, or more precisely Rin, possessed. The whole story of Separon unfolded before her eyes, as if it were happening right now. Rin said that she has other abilities that she can use, but the mark is still too small, so there are almost no possibilities right now. Elizabeth thought it would be worth asking her more about it. She still couldn't do anything. At that moment, the butler knocked on the door. Burns apologized for the disturbance and conveyed that the gentleman proposed to dine in the greenhouse that day. Elizabeth was delighted and said that she was free and would come soon. Burns replied that in that case they would wait for her in the greenhouse. Elizabeth thought he would notice Rin, but she said that others couldn't see her. Elizabeth was scared, and Rin asked to take her with her to the greenhouse. Elizabeth said it was just dinner, but Rin insisted and promised to keep a low profile. Elizabeth agreed, but warned Rin to be very quiet. She assured Ani that she could trust her. Rin reminded them of the mine and said that it might have already been found. Then they will be able to get to the magic stone, but they have almost no time. Elizabeth herself realized this was a serious problem. Her father noticed something was wrong with her. She didn't know what to answer if he asked how she knew about the mine. And what should I say if he asks why she needs a magic stone? This is a world of magic and divine powers. She could say that she learned everything in a dream, but then it would be like she was lying to her father. Elizabeth wanted to tell the truth right now, but she felt it was too early. Rin said that Ani thinks too much and can tell at any time. Elizabeth asked why her father wasn't eating. Dick realized it was time for dinner. It wasn't just the mine. Elizabeth needed a place to grow medicinal herbs in large quantities, and without any unnecessary attention. No matter what she thought, the only thing that came to mind was the duchy. She wondered why she suddenly remembered Mr. Balnay. Elizabeth blushed, and her father asked if everything was okay. She replied that she just had a sore throat. Dick was worried that he had made her come in vain if she was not feeling well. Elizabeth assured him that she was indeed fine and much stronger than he thought. Besides, her father invited her here for a reason, but to tell her something important. Elizabeth's opinion was the most important thing to him, but the Count wanted to officially announce her awakening. Elizabeth didn't object, knowing that after this, some people would start to act. Dick asked if Ellie would really be okay. She confirmed it, because that way she could find out what happened 7 years ago. This was her chance. Besides, her father had promised to protect her, and Elizabeth believed him. The Count really did make this promise and will no longer allow his daughter to be exposed to danger. He will take care of everything related to the mark and the temple, so she has nothing to worry about. All Elizabeth needs to do is focus on recovery. In this life, she is no longer alone, and everything will definitely be fine. Elizabeth began to take an interest in the servants, clothing, their style and habits at the estate. After the official announcement of her awakening, she received many gifts and letters. Larry didn't expect her mistress to be so popular, although with such beauty it's not surprising. Elizabeth also didn't think that she would attract so much attention, because this had not happened in past lives. Larry said to call her anytime. Elizabeth was grateful for her help. Elizabeth asked about Cecile. The maid told her that her mother was seriously ill and left alone. Elizabeth immediately told her to go, and promised to talk to Burns herself. She wanted to collect medicinal herbs for her, but Cecile said that her vacation was enough for her. Larry asked if Cecile was leaving, as the curtains needed to be washed today, and advised the lady to rest. Cecile was genuinely grateful, but Elizabeth still wanted to give her the herbs. She didn't know how everything would turn out, because she had never encountered anything like this before. Suddenly, Elizabeth noticed a letter from Charlene, who seemed to be very worried. She even visited Elizabeth while she was sleeping, and now invited her to tea if she was okay. Elizabeth decided to go, officially for the high society news, but in reality, to meet Charlene. She was curious about how they had all changed. She asked Rin if she could help. Rin asked what was going on, and Elizabeth explained the whole situation. The knight asked Lady Elizabeth what she was doing there. She replied that she was just taking a stroll. Suddenly, her father ran up to her, worried that she was still too weak to be outside. Elizabeth said that she could already walk, and she was curious when he would return. They decided to take a short walk, get some fresh air, and then have lunch together. Dick had a dream in which he saw his daughter being put into eternal sleep. He decided it was just a dream, too realistic to tell Elizabeth about. Suddenly, Elizabeth asked him what he was thinking about. Dick replied that it was nothing in particular. Then Elizabeth said she had a request. The Count assured her that she could ask for anything. Elizabeth told Charlene about her invitation to tea and asked permission to go. She said she felt better and wanted to understand what was happening in society. Besides, there would be people nearby who could protect her. Her father couldn't understand how she knew this. In fact, it was Rin who told about it, and Elizabeth begged him to let her go. At the same time, in Redern, the maid Cecile came to visit her mother. The Count found it hard to believe that the guards could have somehow given themselves away to Elizabeth. Camille was certain that this simply couldn't happen. Dick couldn't understand how she'd found out about the security. Camille apologized, admitting he had no explanation. The Count asked if he was sure he had not noticed anything strange. He was informed that the lady had begun talking to herself more often. Dick was surprised. He didn't understand whether this could be connected with the fact that the child had just woken up and learned about the security. Dick dismissed the knight and ordered him to report any, even the most insignificant, oddity. He had that dream again. Even if it was just a dream, the Count didn't understand why it kept coming back. In his dream, he saw a man putting Elizabeth into eternal sleep and begged him to stop. Each time he woke up in horror, seeing his daughter plunge into eternal sleep. The Count did not understand why this dream continued to appear, because it was too real to be a dream. Dick had seen dreams like this before, but this was the first time he was the one who put her into eternal sleep. Elizabeth would only be able to attend the tea party with her father's permission. Rin asked why that was so important. The Mark thought it would be fun. Elizabeth replied that her friends would be there, and she would have the opportunity to learn about what was going on in the world. Rin said that they could ask at the estate, but Elizabeth replied that they considered her a child here and would not tell her anything. If this continues, it will be difficult to find the mine. At that moment, my father entered the room. The Count asked if he was disturbing her, as Elizabeth looked busy. She replied that she was just reading, and noticed that her father looked tired. Elizabeth assumed he hadn't slept well. Dick hesitated to tell her. This had happened before, but now dreams about Elizabeth began to appear more and more often. The scariest part is that she always falls into eternal sleep during them. Elizabeth said they were just dreams. She reminded him that she was sitting next to him now, and that everything was fine. At first, Dick thought so too. He hoped it was just a dream, but in the last one, he himself plunged her into eternal sleep. If this is punishment for past mistakes, Dick is ready to accept it. But he is scared because he is afraid that these may not be just dreams. Elizabeth asked her father to promise that he would not break down after hearing her story. He didn't immediately understand what she meant, and Elizabeth explained that she wanted to tell him everything. She asked him to promise this. Her father said that if she was having a hard time, she could tell him later. Then Elizabeth revealed the truth, that this life was already her 30th. From the very beginning, this life was different, as was the meeting with her father and his attitude towards her. Elizabeth doesn't know why he has such dreams, but she feels how much he loves her. So now she is happier than ever and hopes that her father will not blame himself. Because everything is different now, Dick didn't know how to look his daughter in the eyes. He was afraid he no longer had the right to be around. Elizabeth said such words hurt her. Dick replied that that was not what he meant and that he simply wanted to apologize. Elizabeth threw herself into his arms and told him that he shouldn't cry because of her. She added that she had something else she wanted to tell him. Her father noticed that the news wasn't over. Elizabeth said that there is a mine with magical stones on the territory of Merds. As far as she remembers, the mine has no owner, and she would like to extract stones and sell them at an affordable price. The Count asked if she was doing this to prepare for the cold weather. Even if he hadn't believed it, Elizabeth would have done it herself. Her father couldn't understand what she was thinking. He said he now sees how they can do it together. The Count promised to contact the Duke of Balne and offer to go there together. Elizabeth hadn't traveled anywhere for a long time and was glad that her father allowed her to. Charlene was happy to meet them and was very worried about Elizabeth. Elizabeth thanked her for her concern, because they were friends. Charlene said Elizabeth looked wonderful and blossomed. Ellie responded in kind. Elizabeth was delighted by the warm welcome and understood that it could not have been otherwise. The ladies were relieved to realize that Elizabeth was nothing like Jezebel. Elizabeth was surprised to learn that they knew her sister. It turned out that Jezebel often attended tea parties, but she's rarely invited due to her difficult personality. She once had a heated argument with one of the ladies. Jezebel is often conflicted, and this will become even more noticeable after her debut. Charlene noticed Elizabeth's anxiety and suggested changing the subject. But Elizabeth should still talk to Jezebel. Kihar learned that Elizabeth had woken up and ordered increased surveillance. They must not miss the moment and are obliged to bring her back alive. Kihar wouldn't mind if she broke her arms or legs while resisting. Grace said that everything was almost ready and they could put the brand on it, keeping it under control. Besides, Elizabeth is a rare beauty, and Kihar is looking forward to meeting her. Leschi asked why they should continue to create cures if Lady Elizabeth had already woken up. Balna coldly replied that he was not obliged to satisfy the idle curiosity of the guards. Her body has changed, but the main thing is that Elizabeth can smile so carefree. The Duke asked what Liche had come to report. The Creed family had requested permission to explore the Merds forest. Balne was surprised, and Liche clarified that they were talking about Mount Merds. Rumor had it that Lady Elizabeth was going there too. The Duke couldn't understand why. Liche did not know the reason and offered to find out, but the gentleman refused. Balne said that he would answer personally and at the same time see Elizabeth again. The father was not at the estate, and no one expected the Duke to come himself. Elizabeth was hosting guests for the first time and was worried about whether she had done everything correctly. The butler asked if she was ready. Elizabeth hopefully asked if they had forgotten anything. Burns assured that everything was perfect, as he had been preparing since early morning. It's time for the meeting. Duke Balna has already arrived. The butler asked the lady not to worry, and Elizabeth tried to remain calm. She needed permission to explore the Merd's forest at all costs. Elizabeth decided to do everything to get her request across. It seemed to the Duke that they had already decided how to address each other. He looked much more relaxed than last time. As for exploring the forest, Elizabeth could do it as much as she wanted. Anything found there will belong to the Creed family, no matter what it turns out to be. Elizabeth was glad of the permission, but she felt that the Duke knew more than he was saying. She wondered whether she should tell him everything. Balna explained that he gave permission without question because the Creed family had asked for it. He has known the Count for a long time, trusts him, and considers Elizabeth a kind person, so he had no reason not to believe them. Elizabeth was grateful to him. She said that she would definitely repay the trust, and Balna was waiting for this with interest. The Duke offered to include his men in Elizabeth's security. There are many dangerous creatures in the forest and difficult terrain, so it will be risky for two people. Elizabeth replied that the Knights of the Creed family and her father would be with them. In addition, they will be accompanied by personal security, so they will not get lost. But the Duke was looking for an excuse to spend time with her and regretted that she did not know his feelings. Elizabeth thanked him for the offer, and Balna was glad at least for that. Elizabeth was strikingly charming. The last time she was here, she was kidnapped, so she didn't know how steep the mountain was. Her father asked if she could go any further. Elizabeth replied that she could, since she had run 10 laps before. Her father asked again, and she became embarrassed. Suddenly, the Count grabbed his daughter and hugged her, saving her from the arrow. He ordered everyone to get ready, announcing that they were under attack. Elizabeth was in shock. The Count asked if they had managed to determine their location, but it was difficult because of the trees. 4 guards tried to find the attackers, and Kamal suggested moving to an open area. Her father asked if Elizabeth could walk. She replied that she could even run. In such a situation, Elizabeth did not intend to be a burden to them. A stranger appeared before them. Dick immediately ordered Elizabeth to stay behind him. They were quickly surrounded on all sides. Kamal told the master that they needed to retreat and leave the knights behind. Kamal assumed that these were most likely all the attackers, but he was not completely sure. Dick knew that if Elizabeth stayed here, the danger for her would only increase. As a last resort, her bracelet contained spatial and protective magic. Her father said he would give the signal, and she should run as fast as she could. The Count added that this was their chance if he could distract the enemies. Rin told Elizabeth that the pursuit was still ongoing, so she needed to lie low. Elizabeth didn't want to believe that anything had happened to the guards and her father. Rin, however, hoped that they might be allies. Elizabeth began searching for something in the rock. Rin screamed at her to stop and run. Elizabeth noticed the passage and began to make her way inside, because the seal should be there. It seemed she had touched something hidden. Rin screamed that the enemies were already very close. Elizabeth found the seal she needed. The man behind her mockingly remarked that she was a good runner. Elizabeth needed to seal the deal as quickly as possible. The man didn't understand what she was up to, but he was certain it wouldn't work. Elizabeth had to escape. The man said she wouldn't be able to slip away. He insisted that she follow him quietly, while Elizabeth stalled for time. She decided to ask who they were and who their owner was. The man replied that she would soon find out for herself. Elizabeth didn't understand why nothing was working and screamed to be let go. If Balna had known that things would turn out this way, he would have specified exactly what territory they were going to explore. He was informed that intruders had been spotted in the forest. The Duke initially assumed they were Count Creed's men, but the knight reported that there were traces of other people there. The Duke ordered a search party of elite fighters to be assembled to ensure that no one was missed. Balna wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but the presence of intruders was alarming, especially on the very day the Crit family began their investigation. They needed to catch at least one and interrogate him. Balna decided to climb the mountain and look around. At the top, he saw Elizabeth. She literally fell into his arms. The Duke immediately asked if she was all right. He didn't understand what had happened. Elizabeth hugged him tightly and said she thought she was about to fall into eternal sleep. But it was all just beginning. Balna gently asked her to calm down. The bracelet was red, meaning he'd used up all his magic. She couldn't have damaged her wrist. The Duke told them to be patient for a little while and began to enter the water, assuring them that there was nothing to be afraid of. He's nearby. Elizabeth couldn't believe it was happening, and she asked him to tell her it wasn't a dream. She was afraid to wake up and find herself in that place again. Balnai said that this was not a dream, and that he would always be there and protect her. Elizabeth no longer needed to be afraid. She was very grateful, because this time, the fear was truly intense. Elizabeth had previously thought there would come a time when falling into eternal sleep would seem the best option. She hadn't expected to feel so peaceful now. Elizabeth said that she had calmed down and he could let her go. The bracelet seemed to have cooled. Balna asked her not to argue and to hold on tighter. He promised to deliver her to the duchy. Elizabeth agreed. She didn't know what was wrong with her father and the knights. Rin said she was fine. Rin was asleep, so Elizabeth couldn't ask anything. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and a request to come in. It was the Duke. He bought the dress as a gift and remarked that it suited her very well. Elizabeth asked if anything had become known. He reported that the Count and the knights had returned to the county. This was a great relief. At some point, they simply ran away, and it became clear that Elizabeth was the target. Elizabeth decided that this was the work of Grace and Kihara. There were no other options. Their power was frighteningly strong. Balni knew she was struggling, but he wanted to offer her something. He felt like he was doing the wrong thing. He asked her how she felt about living at the Gadian estate. The Duke wanted to protect Elizabeth from any threat. Now, Balnay was sure that there was a spy in Count Creed's house. More attacks were possible. A little more, and Elizabeth would have misunderstood him. She agreed and hoped that he would take care of her. Elizabeth knew her father would be worried. Balnay said he would explain everything to him himself. Elizabeth noticed that he was already busy, but the Duke still needed to talk to the Count. Elizabeth realized that the conversation would definitely be about the attack. The Duke asked her to have a good rest and said that they would see each other tomorrow. It's better to find out everything later. Elizabeth will talk to Rin first when she wakes up. Balnay himself could not believe that they would live in the same castle, and was even embarrassed. It appears the attackers used black magic. The Count took hostages for interrogation. The Count ran up to the Duke and asked where Elizabeth was. Balnay replied that she was at the estate. She is not injured and is completely safe, so there is nothing to worry about. The greater concern lay with the Count himself. Dick couldn't understand why the Duke had come alone. Balnay had difficulty communicating that Elizabeth would be staying with him for the time being, and that his permission was needed for this. But it really is safer there now. As the Duke said, his estate is much more closed than the county holdings. The chances of a spy there are minimal. There will be no leaks, and he will be able to protect Elizabeth. But as a father, Dick felt terrible. The Duke asked him if he really thought he could take advantage of her weakness. The Count took it as if she had not been weak, the Duke would have done something. Balnay tried to explain, but the knights sat in complete bewilderment. The Duke felt that he had been misunderstood, so he began to make excuses. The Count understood him and asked him to take care of Elizabeth. Balnay assured that he would do everything possible to protect her. Most of the attackers managed to escape, and those captured used self-destruct magic before being interrogated. It seemed they had a poor command of black magic. The Count considered this his fault. He failed to recognize the enemy in time and allowed Elizabeth to be left without proper protection. Balnay said it wasn't his fault, as knights rarely encountered black magic. Their job was protection, not reconnaissance or assassination. The Count was shocked by the scale of the enemy network. He asked if the mercenaries were connected to the temple. The Duke confirmed this and clarified that they were sent by High Priest Kihar. If the knights protect the child with the mark, then the shadows protect the master of the temple. The Count didn't understand what was so dangerous about the temple that such security was needed. Perhaps it was just an excuse. They needed to build up their strength to confront the royal family. Otherwise, it would be considered treason. The temple's true meaning has long since disappeared, and false prophecies have multiplied. The prophecy Dale received was not tied to a specific location. He simply happened to be in the right place at the right time. God doesn't like to be tied to one place. It turned out that the Crete family was being used by a temple that did not even have a deity. Balnay understood what Dick was thinking, but suggested solving problems as they arose. The Duke would soon be in touch with the Count again, if only he hadn't accepted the outstretched hand. If he had not fallen in love with Elizabeth and given up his divine power for her, she would have been happier. Elizabeth told her father she was fine. He asked if she was afraid to stay there. She replied that this was the Duchy of Gadian and that she was safe here. After making sure that Elizabeth was okay, The father was able to calm down a little. The Count promised to make his estate safe. Elizabeth wished him good night. Balney noticed how worried the Count was. Elizabeth added that she was particularly worried about the black magic. The Duke couldn't understand how she knew about it. She said she just felt it and guessed, not knowing how to explain it. Balney suggested it was because of the mark or past experience. Elizabeth asked when she could return home. Balney was about to ask if she felt uncomfortable here, but she immediately denied it. She felt like she was making him uncomfortable, despite his words. Besides, my father was worried. Balney thought 7 to 10 days would be enough. The Duke said that there were many interesting places in his domain, and even 10 days would not be enough to see everything. Maybe she'll really like something here. Balney would be glad if she considered staying. Elizabeth asked if she really could walk anywhere. Balney confirmed it without hesitation. Moreover, she is allowed to look, touch, and take whatever catches her eye. In this house, she can do whatever she wants. Elizabeth didn't understand why he trusted her so much. Balney admitted that from the outside it looked suspicious, but he couldn't talk about the events of the past. Sometimes he himself felt as if it had all been just a dream. The Duke said he trusted Count Creed, which meant he trusted her too, as his person and someone dear to him. He thought that explanation was enough for now. Elizabeth thought he had a secret he couldn't talk about. It wasn't something she could share right now. Elizabeth said she had something she wanted to tell him too. She would be glad if one day they could share their secrets with each other. In the end, Elizabeth was the first to talk about profit-sharing percentages. She asked if the Duke knew about the mine with magical stones. He confirmed that he did, but Balney didn't see any particular need for it, and therefore didn't attach any importance to it. If Elizabeth were to be the chief engraver, he was willing to entrust it to her, so Elizabeth could do whatever she wanted. She wondered if there was anything the Duke himself desired. Rin wanted to say something about that man, but suddenly fell silent and said that it was not important. This man caused a strange melancholy in Rin, or perhaps she just imagined it. The Duke asked the butler how Elizabeth was. Rand reported that she was already up, and waking up surprisingly early. Balna wondered what she was doing. Rand reported that Elizabeth had asked if she was really allowed to explore the house. That's exactly what she was doing now, on the 3rd floor. The Duke always reacted this way when talking about Lady Elizabeth, so the butler was no longer surprised. Rand asked what to do with breakfast. The Duke decided to go and ask her personally. It seemed his own surprise had not yet worn off. The training ground here was truly magnificent. The Duke asked her what it was that attracted her so much. He asked Elizabeth to tell him what she especially liked about it. The Duke didn't understand why she was so surprised. Elizabeth explained that he had appeared too suddenly. He was too close. Balney thought she didn't like it, which meant she was attracted to the training ground. Balney really wanted to give her a gift. Elizabeth didn't understand why he was looking for her, but the Duke wanted to talk about breakfast. He asked if there was anything in particular she would like. Elizabeth admitted that she had no appetite. The Duke said it was not good to skip breakfast and offered to show her the house instead. Elizabeth was sincerely grateful to him for accompanying her. She wondered if he treated everyone he trusted this way and why she even cared. Elizabeth didn't even know that the Duke collected art. Balney didn't consider it a hobby. He simply bought paintings he liked during his travels, until they became too numerous. Each one of them warmed the soul. Elizabeth asked if there was a reason for choosing these particular paintings. He replied that it was a feeling of loss, of something important, long forgotten. Elizabeth was eager to know what it meant, but now it was difficult for him to explain. Elizabeth noticed that he was hiding something again. For some reason, this upset her. She said he had too many secrets he didn't want to share. Elizabeth asked if she could hope that one day he would tell her his secret. She said she would wait and suggested going into the next room. The Duke asked her to wait a minute. He had something for her, and he would show her the rest of the house later. He really wanted to spend time with her. Elizabeth was surprised. She thought something had happened. Balney said everything would become clear during the walk. Elizabeth didn't understand why she was so nervous. As luck would have it, the Duke sat down next to her. Balney said he hadn't heard correctly, and Elizabeth replied that it didn't matter. The Duke asked if she could try it on. Elizabeth remarked that the bracelet was similar to one he had already given her. He kept the design because it suits her very well, but made the bracelet stronger. It had more magical power, so it was more useful and wouldn't break so easily. Elizabeth thanked him and asked if she could put the bracelet on a little later. The Duke understood what she wanted to hide and said that she did not need to hide here. Elizabeth was shocked to realize that he knew about the mark. Balney said that only those he trusted completely were allowed in here, and they were protecting the same thing she was protecting. But most importantly, he wants to know everything about Elizabeth, from the little things to the most important ones. The Duke asked if she would allow him to do this. Elizabeth didn't understand why he was doing this. After all, he had already said that he trusted her father, and therefore her. Elizabeth was doubtful and asked if he was so kind to everyone he trusted. She asked if he told everyone that he wanted to know everything about them. Elizabeth knew she was overdoing it. Perhaps he still saw her as a child, which was why he was so kind. But she might have misinterpreted his kindness. The Duke said she hadn't. He treats her this way because it's her. And he wants to know everything precisely because it's her. He admitted it sounded sudden, but he wanted to get to know her better. Elizabeth only wanted to avoid misunderstandings. It seems she has received a confession. Seeing her reaction, the Duke thought he'd ruined everything. But Elizabeth said she was fine. He felt relieved. Still, it was asking too much, wanting her to want to know him too. But there was no need to rush, because she had no life experience or memories of the past. The Duke said that she needed to be patient for a little while, as he wanted to put a new bracelet on her. Elizabeth reassured herself that it was balne, and she would be fine. The mark he left behind, she had become a little smaller but looked the same. Elizabeth called out to him, and he was afraid that he had hurt her. She immediately denied it, saying she was simply confused. Balne apologized for his awkwardness. Elizabeth assured her that everything was fine. The Duke replied that she didn't have to always say that, especially around him. If it's not allowed, it's not allowed. If you don't like it, you need to say so. He wanted her to be honest with him, but she didn't do anything he wouldn't like. The Duke asked if she considered him a man who did not cause her discomfort. If she spoke now, he would be more careful. At that moment, Rand knocked and said there was little time. The answer would have to be heard later, so the Duke asked Elizabeth to wait here. Elizabeth thought it was nothing she wouldn't like, but she didn't see what he was going to be careful about. Creed County. Jezebel didn't expect a warm welcome, but no one greeted her at all. The servants reported that they had received orders to provide her with only minimal support. Jezebel didn't want to believe that funding and treatment would be any different. She understood that it was all because of Elizabeth, but she decided to control herself and remember her mother's words. Jezebel waved them off and headed towards her room, wanting to rest. She was informed that it was a different building and that she would have to go there. The butler asked Dick if he was sure he wanted to leave Jezebel like that. The Count replied that she had enough money as it was. The Count was even glad that Elizabeth was not at home and inquired about the preparations for her debut. Burns received a message that the Duke was taking full responsibility and had made the best possible preparations. He can be trusted, including dress, jewelry, and escort. Dick agreed that he could be trusted to make the debut, although the rest was questionable. Rand felt his master's gaze on him. If he hadn't intervened, disaster would have happened. Elizabeth had completely forgotten about the debut. The tailor asked if she could ask her one question. She asked Elizabeth what she thought of the Duke of Balne, which surprised her greatly. The tailor admitted that she had been serving the Duke for a long time, and this was the first time she had seen him care for someone so much. So she decided to ask and apologized for any possible insolence. Elizabeth remembered the Duke's words that she was the only one he treated so warmly. The tailor took all the measurements and said that she would inform me later about the design choice. They will prepare the best dress that will highlight her beauty. It turned out to be a very labor-intensive process. In my past life, everything was different, but there were still many problems to be solved. Balne asked if they were ready. The tailor was indignant, declaring that it was impolite to barge in unannounced. And yet, thanks to these people, Elizabeth was full of expectations. The castle was always surrounded by silence, and in the mornings it seemed especially calm. But there should have been a bustle outside. Seeing the empty space where the training ground should have been, Elizabeth was shocked. Now the space seemed even larger. There would be enough room here to grow medicinal herbs. The Duke probably had his own reasons for removing everything from there, and nothing can be done about it. Rand didn't understand why Lady was looking out the window like that, and didn't expect her to want to go out. He hurried to her and asked if she needed anything, but Elizabeth denied it and only asked about the Duke. Rand said he had some business to attend to and would let him know when he returned. The Duke promised not to be late. Elizabeth asked him to let her know, and the butler offered to have lunch while she waited.